All right. Well, welcome everybody. Um, we are here tonight to have a panel. It's a webinar panel called "What is Worker Power?" Um, Before we get started, just a little bit of an introduction. My name is Dorian Wallace. I'm a composer and pianist, and I am one of the co-founders, as well as one of the co-composers of one of the works that we'll be discussing. But one of the co-founders of 10th Intervention. So, 10th Intervention is equal parts music series and artist collective in New York City. As ambassadors of modern music, we present a bold and progressive concert series that explores the intersection of performance, experiential art, and its potential to reflect social issues. Songs of the Resistance is a concert program featuring community chorus and chamber ensembles centered around music that represents the power of the collective, performed by 10th Intervention and Sing in Solidarity Chorus. The program includes a new work, world premiere, by Bonita Oliver and Dorian Wallace, called Fan the Flames of Discontent, a wage earner's cantata, that incorporates songs from within the IWW songbook. Also on the program are two other works by composers George Lewis and Sarah Hennies. Each work examines the role of music as a vehicle for building solidarity and expressing discontent through the collective voice and personal collective responsibility for the sonic environment. Um, just a little bit of background on the piece that I am co-writing with Bonita, Fan the Flames of Discontent. Bonita and I had met through Sing in Solidarity, which is a socialist chorus that performs at a lot of activist events and political events. And we were just very drawn towards each other's musical abilities and all of that sort of thing. So I had a dream for a long time of writing a cantata based around the songs of the IWW and the labor movement as a whole. But as we began to do some deeper diving, we realized that we wanted to discuss not only the IWW, but the labor movement altogether. And so, over the past 3 months, we have been interviewing various labor organizers, activists, academics, and etc. And tonight, we are bringing all of those people that we've been working with tonight to talk to all of you. So, I'm going to pass it off to Bonita, and thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Dorian. And yes, I'm really grateful to be here. I'm very grateful to all of you panelists for agreeing to have this conversation. I'm looking forward to hearing everything you have to say. I am a performance artist. I am a proud member of SAG-AFTRA, the Actors Union, Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. Very proud member, and I've been with them since 2009. And now I'd like to introduce our panelists to everyone. First, we have Laura Friedman. Laura has been an organizer for her entire career. Laura began her work life as a VISTA volunteer, working as a paralegal and welfare rights organizer. She went on to become a union organizer for many years, and from there became the policy director for Congressman Nadler. Today, she has come full circle and is very active in her community, trying to protect it from the ravages of luxury overdevelopment. Thank you, Laura. We have Bobby Greenberg. He is the vice president of the NYC Labor Chorus and has been with them since 1993. He is also a 54-year member of UFT. We have Linda Bailey. Dr. Linda Bailey McWeeny is the founder of Reggae Math Foundation and an adjunct assistant professor of economics at College of Staten Island. She is also an aspiring musician, and we're very happy to have her. And we have Annie Levin. Annie Levin, is a co-founder of Sing in Solidarity, a socialist movement choir that draws its repertoire from the rich tradition of international revolutionary song. She writes fiction and nonfiction and is a former UAW member. Next is Lucy Murphy. Lucy Murphy is a native of DC, where she is a vocalist who often leads group singing and worked for 14 years as a medical interpreter of Spanish and English. Currently, she provides therapeutic music to returning citizens and leads songs at poor people's campaign events. She has a long history of community activism, especially working with children at risk. Adam Trott is based out of Massachusetts. He is the director of member relations at Shared Capital Cooperative and executive director of the Valley Alliance of Worker Cooperatives. He was also a union member of United Electrical Workers. Robert Hughes is a steward in Unite Here, Low 23 for 7 years. He's also the chair of DSA Central Indiana chapter. And then last but not least, Ben Ferguson. Benjamin Ferguson has been an organizer with the Industrial Workers of the World for over 20 years. And we're very happy to have him and all of you here. So I just want to dive right in and ask the question, the primary question: what is worker power? What is power? What is specifically worker power, and how do we get more of it? So I'm going to go in order, starting with Lucy, and if everyone else could stay muted, and Lucy, you can unmute yourself. What is worker power?
Well, the workers have the power. Everything that is created, all the services are provided by workers. Unfortunately, a lot of our power is alienated from us because much of what we produce does not come to us. It comes to corporations and entities that employ us.
Thank you. And Robert, what is worker power?
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. As I was having this short conversation with you and with you, Bonita and Dorian, yesterday, my definition of power is something a little bit personal, because I come from a people who that traditionally historically hasn't had any power, and particularly me being homosexual, that's an additional lens of being put out. So I knew the concept of worker power. It didn't really crystallize for me until I got my present job. I'm in. It's a unionized job, as I said, Unite Here. It didn't crystallize until I was able to go to my management team and demand that we have mats, because I work in a cafeteria on concrete for 8 hours a day. Obviously, you need something to protect your feet. And it didn't, like I said, a couple weeks later, we had mats. And from that point on, it really made clear to me just what sort of power that is, because we can talk about the theory of power, so forth and so on, but when you actually see a manifestation of that power, what that power can, what a little thing that power can do, it really, to me, is absolutely amazing, and something that that I really want all workers, whether they're in a union or not in a union, to have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. Next, Linda, worker power, what is it?
Hi, thank you for having me. And just want to kind of agree with Robert there, but something that I had written down after seeing these questions. So for me, power is partially the ability to make choices. And if you don't have, I feel like I agree with Lucy that we have the power. We might not feel we have the power. So what is that? What is worker power's ability actually to ask for? So he could ask for the max, right? So you might not be able to ask for what you want, a safe environment, right? So heard stories of, you know, corporations, and you're in an unsafe environment and you don't feel like you can ask for a safe environment, because then you're going to get, you know, you're going to lose your job, right? And we heard about the Amazon worker who tried to create a safe environment, and suddenly he lost his job. And there was, you know, there was a reason for it. That reason was not applied to everybody. So I think the power to be able to make choices of even staying home, right? So some companies gave their employees choices. You could come to work. If you don't feel safe, you can stay home. That's power to be able to make that choice. So to me, choice is a big thing, and a lot of people don't feel they have choice. I agree with Lucy that we do have power, but I don't know if people feel they have power. And if they don't feel that power, they feel they have no choice. So to be able to just ask for things, whether it's a higher salary, safe environment, to not have somebody harass you, you know, to actually feel like you have to leave your job to create, you know, so that's to me worker power's choices.
Thank you so much. Very great point. Next we have Ben, worker power. Can you unmute Benjamin?
Thanks again for this wonderful, wonderful event. I'm so excited to see this happening. But yeah, workers' power. That's the one and only thing that's going to get us out of the horror, which is guaranteed by capitalism. It's where it's to be found on the shop floor whenever two or more workers come together to make their work better and get better pay. You certainly don't need a majority to make things happen in the workplace. But of course, the more you have, the stronger you get, and the better you'll be able to humble your boss and get your demands met. If you really want to see more power, organize the industry, because that's where workers are strongest, when their entire industry is organized. And you go after that holy grail, the hiring hall. And if you really, really organize well, if you really get absolute workers' power, then you get the general strike. We can literally stop wars with it. It's very, very exciting just thinking about it. But even on a micro level, working with your coworkers, just one or two of them, you can get amazing things done.
Thank you. Yes, very, very good point. Having those allies, that unity is definitely paramount. And next up, we have Annie.
So I want to echo what Linda was saying about how worker power is, I think, about the ability to make choices. And I was thinking about this question in the context of my recent employment, where I went from being a teacher and, you know, albeit an adjunct professor, and I had a lot of issues with how much I was paid and how much I was able to work and my health insurance, and all those were, you know, were very, very big problems. What I did not have a problem with was a sense of bodily autonomy or self-determination. You were mostly left alone as long as you were in the classroom. So there was a freedom and liberation there. And I made a change where I wanted more money. So I took a job in university administration. And, you know, some of those concerns were taken care of, but I no longer had self-determination. I no longer had bodily autonomy. And so there was a huge loss, I think, in power of workers when you're in the kind of open plan office and you have to kind of be aware of who's watching you when you need to leave, go to the bathroom, make phone calls, do anything. And so that feeling of being watched was to have kind of experienced that for the first time at a very late age was quite a radicalizing moment for me.
Thank you so much. And Adam.
It's great to be here with everybody. For me, thinking about power and thinking about worker power, what I think about are channels and availability for workers to gather together and democratically control and own the things they need to survive and thrive in our lives. One of the reasons I'm so excited to be here is because this group is connected to not just labor, not just other movements that are integrally connected, but also art. So when I think of power, I think of people in decisions, with the power of decisions, legislators, educators, media, and all businesses that have a voice of labor at the table directing and controlling those businesses.
Thank you so much. Laura. Oh, unmute. Oh, Laura, could you unmute? Oh, you're still muted.
Okay, sorry. I was saying that I was so happy to be invited to be part of this discussion. It's such an important discussion. And it's a discussion we don't have that much anymore. We talk about a lot of other things and we forget about this primary and profound issue, labor. I just want to, in addition to everything that everybody has said, because it's all true, is that who is a worker? You know, who is that person? A worker is not just somebody who goes to work. A worker is part of the world. A worker is part of the community. A worker is so integral. And so the skills that we learn in the PTA are the skills that we bring to our workplace. And we bring that back from our workplace to our work in the community. And they are completely and they are completely intertwined. And so you shouldn't have one without the other. So workers, community is a huge, important aspect of our work. And when we organize, it's the pebble in the water that filters out throughout the entire community. Our lives are made much better by a union. Our kids can be, can have the things that they need, hopefully. We reach out to all sorts of people when we reach out to all the people who work with us, and then we take that and we bring that into our neighborhoods and our communities. So worker power, it goes all over the place.
Thank you. And Bobby.
Hi, I'm so glad that you guys were able to set this up. Thank you, Bonita. Thank you, Dorian. I want to sort of echo what Lucy said earlier, that workers produce everything of human value. And we spend at least a third of our adult lives doing that kind of work. And I think in the bigger context that Laura raises, we spend more than that, where we spend before that and after that, and in our other time beyond those 8 hours or whatever. But I think that within the structure that we live, that we were born into and we still live under, we have very little to say in the place that we're bound to. And it's structured that way. So we're sort of cogs in a wheel. Now, some of us have a little more space for input than others. Some have none. But basically, none of us have the full freedom to have a voice at work, to have a voice in how we produce, what we produce, and who we produce it for, the quality, the quantity. We are basically in a factory system, even though most of us don't work in factories any longer. So I think that the workers' power is the potential to have that freedom. And I think that's what, at all of the experience I've had in working with unions and the chorus, is that we're trying to build our realities into that potential of full freedom for workers in terms of what we produce, how we produce it, and who we produce it for. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bobby. So now that everyone has spoken on the general topic, does anyone have a response for anything that's been said so far? Anyone want to respond to any of the panelists who have spoken? Raise your hand if so, and I'll unmute. Okay, Benjamin, go ahead. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I would really like to, I really appreciate what Laura said, kind of about defining workers, and what she said. I would like to just build on that, saying that even the unemployed are workers, and they need to be organized. Housewives, you bet they're workers, even though they may not have a boss directly. Pretty much everyone is a worker unless you hire or fire, and that's what we need to really focus on here, is just organizing every single person, whether it's a busker or a sex worker who might not have a regular boss. Let's get them all organized.
Thank you. And Linda, you had your hand raised. Would you like to speak?
I wanted to echo something I heard Robert say, which was that, to care about not only people within a union, but people who are, and Benjamin just kind of alludes this also, outside of the union. So I had a relative who was working, and his goal was to get into the union because of how people outside of the union were treated. And so then if you're in the union and you're fine, do you care about the people outside? Because again, there's an ally situation of, you need not just the union support, but are there other people banging on the door? And if you're not letting, allied with those people, that can undermine, right? Just wanted to echo that.
Thank you. Yes, that's something that's really interesting to me. There are maybe many undocumented workers who are possibly afraid to join unions, and who is standing for them? Who is standing for them? How can we support them when they may be afraid to come forward? Does anyone have an answer for that? It's a hard question to answer, especially with the way our government treats people. So I want to move on to this. How does capitalism, Bobby, you mentioned how we are still very much operating within an industrial system, and capitalism, industrial capitalism, starting in the early 1900s in Britain. I'm not a historian, but that's what I would think from the research that I've done, kind of set the model that we still all work within. And it's clearly not working for us in these times. So why are we having such a hard time divesting from that model of capitalism that is very much about hierarchies and privatization, and not really about empowering the workers? Can anybody respond to that? Benjamin.
Yeah, myself. Yes. Well, I mean, that's the history of the world, right? We're fighting the bosses. We're fighting the master class. Those who have power will seek to hold on to it and do anything to hold on to it, including violence. And in the IWW, we talk about building a new society within the shell of the old. And so I think, you could have a revolution, but that's hard. Everyone needs to be on the same page. So I think in this case, the way we do overthrow capitalism, the way we move out of it, is gradual, just taking over our workplaces and then organizing in our communities in the same way we would organize in our workplace. And I think we can see it crumble away. We have seen it crumble away and to different extents over time. Hopefully we'll see it crumble faster.
The time certainly feels, I mean, this time that we're in feels like an opportunity, because everything is crumbling. It seems like this is a prime opportunity for us to make a shift. But I see, Linda, you had your hand up, and also Robert. So why don't I go to Linda first, and then Robert, you'll be up next.
So when I saw, I'd like to thank Dorian Bonita for sending me those questions. I had to go back to my classical economics, kind of like, what did they say again, kind of things, and like, why is it here, and was it? And I think one thing that's interesting is listening to kind of analyses of these. is that Adam Smith, who's, kind of the supply and demand kind of brought that as this is the system, this is the best thing for the world. He actually talked about worker power, and he expected that capitalism was going to make these economies grow, and in a growing economy, then the workers would have some power. And he talked about the fact that if they didn't grow, then we had a problem, right, with worker power. But he was not, anti-worker power. And it's interesting that now when we talk about capitalism, we don't talk about worker power at all. I feel like we don't feel like it's there, right? And the union is kind of to combat the power of the corporation, right? But one of my professors always asked the question, what's the alternative? And I think one of the answers to why capitalism is still for so many people, the thing that they're going to latch onto is that they have this fear of socialism or communism as it was presented in places that it didn't work and where those people rejected it, right? So I have a lot of very good friends from Eastern Europe, and they really hated that, they lived under this, and they were not, they found a lot of things wrong, right? And one of the things that they found very, very problematic is that they didn't have that self-determination. So communism, as it existed in these countries, the people did not feel that they had power. So, I had friends who were told, you're going to go work here at this time. And that's not freedom either. And so a lot of people who know about that don't want that. And so I think that's not inevitable. And that's not what we need to define it. I don't think that's what Marx had in mind either. So I think that there's a fear of rights being taken away, of having no control, which is interesting because that's what we're worried about with capitalism. So I think we have to be maybe more focused on, rather than the labels, what are the policies that we want? And we might find some more allies for the policies that give, people some kind of self-determination and power, rather than a label that somebody's got a picture of something that you're not even thinking about in your mind. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's just that people have seen this other thing and they're afraid of, they don't want that other thing.
Yes, good point about the alternatives that we've been presented with. There are other alternatives out there, and maybe later Adam can speak to that. But next was Robert. He had his hand up, and then I'll go to you, Lucy. But Robert, yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to answer it in a slightly different way because I consider my fight against capitalism to be very personal. I'm 46 years old. 2 times in my life, I've been in homeless shelters, in my 20s and in my 30s. I befriended a group of men in my 20s who are no longer here today. They're all dead. From my perspective, being in a homeless shelter is the ultimate rejection and stripping away of what society says you should have. Society has rejected you because it's failed you. In many cases, your family has rejected you in some cases. So in seeing how the system treated me and those men, because I was in the men's shelter, was deeply personal, revealing, and it just put a spark in me as a memorial to all those men who I knew and all who shaped me as to what a better world, how a better world could. How can I bring about a better world in memorial to those men who struggled, who had personal struggles? Yes, that's true. We weren't perfect, but who also struggle with, oh, what's wrong with me because I can't get a job. I'm looking for a job. I can't find work. Therefore, I can't find work. I appear to be nothing in the eyes of my children or in the eyes of my mother and father, so forth and so on. Because society tells you, hey, you need a job, you need all this stuff. And to me, I dream of a better world where you can get a job, but you can get a good job where you're gainfully employed and you have some sort of fulfillment. You really do. So when someone asks me how do I envision my struggle against capitalism? I just think of those men and think of the memories and think of how how I've come through that particular period of my life where, like I said, I there was a huge wake up call for me, and yes, I could go on and on. So I'm I'm gonna stop now.
Thank you so much for that. And yeah, I mean that brings up, another question that I had about our values. Um, just really refocusing our values, shifting from the material to community to people, making it about people. I think that my observation is that that's a shift that's needed, and perhaps it's something that starts in youth. What are we instilling in our children? But all right, Lucy, you have your hand up.
In talking about values, a lot of our values are shaped by the television, the films, the radio, commercial television, commercial films, and it's a glorification of money. And it's really a lot of very bad perspectives about humanity. So we're almost brainwashed to think poorly of ourselves and suspicious of our neighbors, and instead of thinking about trust and cooperation, it's about competition. So, money is the secure thing, but our neighbors, our coworkers, even our family are kind of shaky. Unfortunately, we're shaped by this, and part of our job as organizers is to lift people's self-esteem, to model respect and self-respect, um, taking care of our health, and taking care of being polite and courteous to people around, and respectful, to listen to people, because we have a lot of things talking at us, but very few people are actually listening, which really raises our self-respect. And in order to really have power, we have to work together, and we have to have some trust and some confidence and some emphasis on cooperation, as opposed to constant competition. And also, the media gives us this picture that we have to compete for scarce resources. There's not enough. There's not enough. So, and even our social service agencies don't provide enough help for all the people who need it. When actually the government has a lot of money that they could be investing in these services and provide services for everybody. But that's not what's happening. That's what we need to push for.
Thank you, Lucy. And as a person who works in the entertainment industry, it's very frustrating for me, um, the scarcity of jobs for people of color within the industry, wanting to shift the narratives, because I know as a Black woman full well, the power of the messaging that we take in from childhood, how it impacts our being, our perspective of ourselves, our neighbors. It's a very profound impact, and yeah, I mean, I'm in this industry, and I feel such a split, such a tear in myself, because I know what the industry is. I know how it's manipulated. I know who pays for the industry. The messages that we're digesting, that we're consuming constantly. And I want to be a part of change. And that does bring me to a question that came in from outside, but I want to go to Annie first because she's had her hand up. Oh, you did have your hand up. Do you still have? Oh, no, Annie, you don't have. Okay, so then I'm going to go to this question because I think it kind of fits in with that. So what would you identify as some of the biggest obstacles to organizing the growing numbers of workers in the gig industries right now? So those are musicians, artists. And anybody, do you have ideas on how to fight those obstacles? The obstacles of competition. You know, there's a lot of competition for jobs. This Our country doesn't value the arts. You know, we've defunded arts programs in schools. So there's a difference between art and the consumerist stuff that we're getting from the media. You know, there's art, and then there's something else that's totally agenda based and commercial, and it's about sending out the messages. So, so there's great value placed on that, on that industry that is sending out the subliminal messaging. But there's not a lot of value in arts programs that could help children think outside of the box, that can help them build self-esteem, find their own personal voice, let them know that they don't have to fit in to some kind of cookie cutter mold. So yeah, so what does anyone who's an artist here, like Lucy, anyone else on the panel, can you speak to that? Gig workers, freelance writers, independent contract people, what are some of the biggest obstacles to organizing for those industries? Ben? Could you unmute? Sorry. Oh, could you unmute yourself? Yep, we can't hear you. Oh, one more time. There we go.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, we've in our union, we've had a lot of artists come and organize, actually with varying degrees of success. We've had comedians in Portland got together and resolved a number of issues. It's difficult because they're all spread out, and when you don't have a single boss to go after, it's really hard to organize around that. It doesn't mean that it can't be done, and it certainly is extremely crucial, because there are so many artists, and this world would be such a better place if they were organized, because they have so much to give, and there's so many, and it's got to happen, and it's just a matter of them getting together. And of course, one of the biggest obstacles we're seeing right now is this damn pandemic. It's really thrown a wrench into a lot of organizing, because it's so important to meet up in person, to get your confidence and your trust by somewhere other than an email or a Zoom meeting or something. But I'm really glad you asked that question.
Yeah, that's the arts industry is taking a big hit because of the fact that we just can't be in proximity to each other at this time. And another thing about the industry that I brought up to some of you who are artists on this call, and something that's been on my mind, it's really conspicuous how many big name artists are missing, who are not speaking out about what's happening. And these are people with massive impact, massive following and influence, and they're not really speaking out. We have a trickling of people, posting on Instagram, and but it's not really that. Where are the songs of this movement that needs to happen right now? A big part of the civil rights movement was the music. Music was a huge galvanizing force in the civil rights movement, and we had big names, entertainers, Muhammad Ali, James Brown, Nina Simone, Mahalia, so many people, Bob Dylan, people who stood on the front lines and walked with organizers. We don't have that now. My observation is, capitalism is a part of that. People are really so invested in money, and these big companies, that management companies and labels, they're running things, artistry is not what's top priority, and having an individual voice and having a conscious voice is not priority. So I would really like to invite anyone who's watching right now who is an artist. I would really like to invite you to step into this moment that we're in right now, and use your voice to further this cause and to speak for yourselves, because I know as an artist myself, it's very hard to stifle that creative spark, to mute my voice, my unique vision. So I know that that's something that's in a lot of artists. So this would be helping you as well. So I just invite everyone to step in to that role. But does anyone else? I see Lucy, you had your hand up.
I'm having difficulty unmuting myself. I would like to just talk about in the climate that we had. Uh-oh.
We hear you. We hear
Okay.
you. Yep.
But I don't see me, and I know usually the speaker comes on screen. Um, the people were organized into church groups and school groups. Um, communities, neighborhoods were better organized 40, 50 years ago during the civil rights era. And because you had so many people with a common church experience, with the experience of singing together, and then away from their old communities as many of our churches close because the people are no longer there in the community. The schools have lost the art teachers and the music teachers that they once had because, when Ronald Reagan came through, the budgets were cut. So the agency of bringing people together with music and art has kind of disintegrated. So you don't have that glue. But people are right now out in the street. It's a really magic moment when and you see small groups of people who are maybe not as well organized as a Hollywood star or a Broadway star, but people are doing, choruses like Singing in Solidarity or DC Labor Chorus. And, the peace poets are coming out with chants. I can hear my brother crying. I can't breathe. Now I'm in the struggle. And people are picking that up. So there's, but it's very difficult when you don't have people coming to a common place to work, to get people together. But here we have this moment. Everybody's out in the streets. Everybody's got some complaint, either the rent or someone shot. A policeman has shot someone they know, or they've taken someone to the hospital and they couldn't get medical care because their insurance wasn't in order. Everybody is out there complaining, and this is our moment to strike.
Totally agree with you. Annie, you had your hand up, and then I'll go to Adam.
So since starting Sing in Solidarity a couple of years ago, I have been extremely impressed by, I think, the collectivization of performing artists and musicians specifically. I think you have, just by the nature of the field, you must work together. And so I don't think you have quite the same atomization as you see in the arts elsewhere. I know that for writers it is inherently like an atomized, lonely field. But then in addition to that, there it is a very, very small field with very few opportunities, and people kind of treat it like a zero-sum game, so that you are constantly in competition with fellow writers for very, very small amounts of money and power. And the idea that you've got to collectivize if you want to make things better is just unheard of in, I think, particularly a lot of like literary and publishing world, which is a very, very conservative. I'm a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, and I think in a lot of like radical leftist groups, you just don't meet people in the literary world on the left, or very, 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 very few. I think it's a very sort of liberal centrist area, and I think to add to that, the conservatism of literature, you have the idea that the art can really only be for itself. It's not there to make change. It's not there to actually have an impact on people's lives. It's just a beautiful thing that you put on the shelf, and that reactionary sort of message is just it's this subliminal message that is in every single classroom. I think it's implanted in people about what I think a lot of contemporary literature, and I think this is like throughout the arts, what it can do, what it's capable of, is that it's pretty much nothing. Just let it sit there and be beautiful. And of course, you go and you watch Transformers or whatever big Hollywood movie about which is just hitting you over the head with imperial American war propaganda over and over and over again. And like that Hollywood understands that art is not just for itself, that it isn't just something that's going to sit on the shelf and look pretty. So this is, I think, something that literature that I think the left could really, I think, use more of, is like sort of absorbing culture and using it as a weapon against capital.
Amen to that. Adam, you had to do that. Bobby, did you? Oh. And then we'll go to Laura.
Am I on, Bonita?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. I think this, it's in the New York City Labor Chorus. We've discussed many times on the board and among the membership the issue of like how, because we sing a lot of historical labor songs and then incorporate new movements and new ideas into new songs, but realizing in this process how deeply important music was in the building of the American trade union movement, and that we have one of the richest traditions of labor music coming from every struggle in the past. And then we've taken trips, international trips, singing trips to Sweden, to Wales, Southern Wales, to Puerto Rico, to Cuba, and everywhere we go, we see and feel the music of building, of labor. The question, I think, and I think Lucy raised it, is like now it's just, we see it in front of our eyes. There's new music coming up, new rhythms coming up. And I think at least for the labor chorus, our job right now is to incorporate, to try to reflect what's happening now, and also to let young people, to let them hear and feel the music that swam through this American labor movement and kept people alive and in the struggle. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Laura, you had your hand up.
Hi, thank you. I did have my hand up on a whole bunch of different issues. So now I got to try and see if is there a way to weave this together? I don't know. I think that when you look at what's going on in the world today in general, and I want to go back to the discussion a little bit about capitalism and what's going on with capitalism and what that all, filters down to. So we know that capital is changing, right? It's going international, it's gone international, and the impact on unions. You asked, why are unions not growing? Why are they, how are they not attracting people? It's really hard. They being the capitalists, the owners, the bosses, the big corporate owners have really changed the game. And so they now write the rules. They don't belong to any country. They belong to the corporation. And that is, I mean, we were like that in a little way in America, and now the world is like that. They don't have to answer to anybody. And that has changed the whole game in terms of how we organize. But to go from the big picture down to the little picture, I think that no matter what we talk about, what Robert was talking about, what Lucy was talking about, the bottom line is organizing. Organizing however it takes. There were all sorts of different ways to organize. There's organization around the issue in your neighborhood, like I'm involved in right now, the luxury overdevelopment that's happening all over the place, which means no affordable housing, and kicking out the people that are in affordable housing. That's one issue. The issue in the local community, in the school. Well, I was a PTA president for years. And what we had to fight around to get the good things in the schools that we needed, because we weren't the hot middle class school, so, and what that meant in New York City. So I think that organizing, however it takes place, is the answer. And in terms of artists, when we started the New York City Labor Chorus 30 years ago, we did it because we wanted workers from different kinds of work to come together to raise our voices in solidarity. There is nothing, I don't care what, there's nothing more powerful than song and people singing together, and it connects in this profound way. Bobby's right. I mean, the proud history of song in the labor movement is incredible. And when the Labor Chorus went on tour, what was the song that everybody knew, that everybody sang? It was "We Shall Overcome." It was "We Shall Overcome." And that connection, that amazing connection here in America, here in New York City, here in around the world, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I think that organizing through song is a very important thing, but organizing through anything is a very important thing, because once people feel their power, once they can win something, once they can win one person over, that has a profound effect on that person for the rest of their lives. And so that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm recalling again, like you said, what Robert said early on, just feeling the impact of you speaking up about what you needed, and you seeing a result, a change, and how that changed you, and how you continued to organize after that. So definitely speaks to that point. I think, Adam, did you have your hand up? Okay, Linda, I see yours is up.
I wanted to, so something Laura said actually sparked a memory of something about what can you do in this time that we have. And there was a company, I mean, there are people who are now working on something called blockchain that they want to document and have certificates about how workers are treated. So we know that some workers in Asia are basically, they're basically slaves. They don't even have a choice to leave that job that they're in, right? I don't know much about this, but I watched a talk where somebody talked about the nail salons in New York. Like, why is it so cheap to get my nails done in New York versus Michigan? Okay, what's going on there? So I stopped doing my nail. There needs to be a certificate that says you're actually paying the people in this salon. And I don't see anybody moving to do that. There's nobody doing that. I mean, this goes to the point of, are we organizing workers everywhere? Are workers in nail salons going to try to organize? I mean, is anybody trying to organize them? But there's a movement, and I don't see a lot of people involved in that movement, and it seems like the unions could actually get involved with that. So, years ago, I heard about things happening in the banana industry in Central America, and violence against workers in the banana industry in Central America. And that's the kind of thing where I think with technology now, you have to have, just literally have something that documents that the workers, I mean, you can document that the workers are being treated humanely. And I don't see a lot. I know there's a small movement of that, and I don't know why unions are not like on top of that. I think that's a wonderful thing to know, that people are not, there's something else that, I mean, to do with worker rights. You hear about US made, and then somebody says, well, it's US made, but it's made in a prison, and those workers are not paid very much. So where's the, if you can have technology that kind of embeds somehow that this is what this product is not made with, and then people who want to support, say, businesses that are maybe artisan communities or something, but have some documentation. I just try to buy nothing whatsoever that I don't need, because I do believe, I think it was Lucy was saying it before, somehow there was all this messaging about that we should like all these things, and I don't know, I never received that message, and I don't know why, but I don't like things. And I'm trying to get my child to see that, like, no, you don't have to buy that. But I see, like, we go out somewhere and it's a party, and then there's a lot of stuff that's not, I don't want to buy it, and every other kid is buying this thing. And I told my kid, no, we're not. We went to Disney, which I won't be going back to Disney, but before I went, I said, no, we're not buying anything there. This is a big shop. We're gonna go on some rides that we already paid for, and then but his relatives gave him money and he had a budget. But there is this thing that I mean, he wants stuff, and I don't know what it is that makes him want this stuff, because I'm trying to be like the opposite of that. So in order to have some power, one of the things I think that we need as allies, consumers. So one of the things that we see now is that if the company is not doing what we consider right, a lot of people are moving to boycott those companies and go with some other choices. And I think that we can look at, if workers are not being treated right, we can actually somehow document that. And then, people will shift their consumption. Some people, everybody won't shift, but some people will.
That's a really great point. Blockchain technology can be utilized here. I mean, people are starting to grow an awareness about that, but as artists, I know that's something I'm very interested in, how to make sure that the work that I do, that I would put out, is being traced, that I'm in control of it. And I think that is a great way, to consider, keeping track of what's really going on. So yeah, good point. Maybe for the next discussion, we can have somebody who is knowledgeable about blockchain as well in this conversation. So I think, Dorian, you had your hand up. Would you like to?
Yeah, all right, awesome. Well, again, thank you everybody for being a part of this. Yeah, so let's, we've got some comments, comment questions. Sorry, I'm looking at Annie right now, the English teacher, when I said comment question, and whatever. Anyways, we have some questions that came from the comments, so I'm just going to ask them and leave them open for anybody in this panel to answer. So the first one is, isn't the greatest example of workers' power the ability to make specific businesses, industries, or the whole economy stop running until the managers and owners give in to the worker demands? I see Adam.
So I would say that with existing businesses, that's the choice that labor has, is to organize and have control over the basic functioning, whether it's open or closed, some of the worker conditions, and those things are really important. But I want to push back on this idea. No, it's not the best example. Here's why. What I want are workers in charge of it. I don't need workers to have to go and try to debate with an owner who has outside stakeholders, who have outside money, and they have no accountability to the labor outside of what's on the contract, and millions of dollars going to lawyers to fight you in it. What I think, and again, I want unions to organize existing industries. We need that. But when we're talking about worker power, I want labor to run those businesses. That's why I'm in cooperatives. We all have different examples of cooperatives and different experiences. But what I see where I'm working are regular people putting money so they can open a business together, run it democratically, own it democratically, and that's the end of the story. There's no conversation that has to happen with the legislator or a lawyer or a different business owner whose only purpose there is to make money off of us. So I might say there's different ways for labor to have power. And depending on what the discussion is, we have great examples of how that can be used.
Okay, and I believe I saw Ben's hand up as well.
Yeah. Well, certainly, like this question asked, a general strike would be fantastic. If and there's so often there's calls for that over and over in the radical labor movement, but of course we're not organized. We're not nearly organized to do it. It's going to take so much organization. So yeah, here, I totally support that. But just on a micro level, just what you can do on a striking on the job can involve so much disruption that you start with those small wins and then you add up and you get to that big strike. So whoever asked that question, yeah, let's start organizing. Let's do it.
Okay, and also Bobby had his hand up.
I've worked most of my life in education, and there's a sort of an exception in certain ways that where we've organized, or most teachers of the country are organized, but there is still the question, of power, of what our power over the job. What influence do we have in our job, our salaries, basically? So what happened, I think, in the last few years is very interesting to me and to many of us in the education field, is that in certain states like Oklahoma, Arizona, West Virginia, where teachers are, if they are organized at all, do not have representation rights. And in those states, there was a rebellion, basically. And these are red states, a rebellion that produced, well, I think it produced some gains, but the most important thing was you had tens of thousands of teachers and parents and supporters out there and saying, no, we've had it. We're not going to, that line of crossing, we've had it. We're not going to accept this anymore. I think is essential for working people. That without crossing that line, you're still within. I mean, you could say, I'd like to do that. I'd like this to improve. Whatever. It's talk to a great extent. But crossing that line individually is power. Is the beginning of power. It's a taste of power, and from there, anything can happen.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. And this might actually be a good question for the teachers we do have on this panel, because it says, would you say schools are training people to be capitalist workers instead of creators? All right, I see Linda.
So there are lots of great teachers out there. So I started a foundation, and before I started the foundation, I heard exactly that kind of thing, which is, there's these terrible teachers and lots of bad things. And, there are teachers with issues, but I've met a lot of wonderful teachers who are trying within the system, care about the kids. It's amazing. Annie was talking about the ability earlier to, the autonomy of a college adjunct or a professor to run their classes. A lot of teachers actually feel like they can't give the children what they need within the system that we have. Like, I know that this kid can't get what I'm doing now because they need something else, but I've got somebody watching me. Back to what Annie's point about somebody watching you. There are teachers where people kind of watch you, and you can't do what you believe the children need. And even if you know more, like you've had more training, even if you've had success, you know, you have a principal. You can't always, a lot of teachers talk about their own lack of freedom and they have to do something that somebody else says. And so, in terms of that's there's I would encourage everybody to read about the Finnish system. There's a the name is escaping now. It's like something about Finnish education, but it ends with 2.0. I'll try to send it to everybody after on the Facebook page or something. But they talk about the union in Finland for teachers, because I also feel like so I'm part of the PSC CUNY union, and I don't feel very powerful, even though I'm organized. I know that there were a lot of demands, and you know, as adjuncts, this past contract was really, I don't know why it felt worse than the previous contracts in which we didn't get a lot of things that we were sort of like, you'll get it next time, you'll get it next time. In terms of the teachers unions there, it's interesting, the teachers unions advocate for not just the teachers, but for the students. And so they have a policy where they don't do things that harm kids, which by the way is not the case in New York, right? There's things that are demonstrated to negatively affect kids that within the education system have been allowed to happen. And so our schools training you know, students not to like just to be these workers. It's amazing to me that there's documentation of actual meetings where that was actually stated that was the system. And I was recently on another in another discussion where the speaker asked people in the chat, there was over 500 teachers in a chat, and he asked, what is it that children need to learn powerfully? And we listed all these things, and I typed in, and what he put up was all, you know, a list from other surveys. And he basically said what we have in the classroom is the opposite of what everybody put in the chat that we need. So I think there are teachers who are trying. Amazingly, we still don't have something that I think for many, many kids that looks like what we think. And when I talk about powerful learning, one of the things that I think is powerful in learning is the ability to think and question the situation you're in. So if you're in a situation where you're a worker and you feel powerless, can you question, what can I do about this? How can I get out of this? How can I change this? What are the channels? I don't think we're generally, for a lot of kids, we're not creating. For some kids we are, and for some kids we aren't. And I see it, I teach at college, and I see a great difference in the kids that come in. And I always wonder, why is it that this kid can ask a question and then another kid is going to apologize before they ask me a question? I'm sorry to bother you I don't understand. You're in school, I'm being paid to teach you, but they apologize. A lot of public, and it's different from my friends in private schools, by the way. They've got kids just coming in and hanging out, and I've got kids apologizing whenever they have to ask me questions. So something is happening there. I think teachers sometimes also feel powerless by that.
Okay, and I also saw Annie had her hand up.
Yes, I have also had the students who can just talk, and then also the students who have to apologize and say, I'm sorry, or I might be wrong. And I think the teaching philosophy is, I think, to sort of assume that the quiet kid is the kid who is scared, or who isn't brave enough, or who is sort of lacking something, and it's not the classroom as a community that isn't serving that child, isn't allowing that child the space to ask the question. And I think that education right now, especially primary and secondary education in this country, like it gives us a lot of insight into what our work lives are going to be like. I think, think about like the mindlessness of a lot of the tasks, the order and routine, the tedium, and then in addition to that, the social aspects of school, the hierarchies and the status seeking and the competition. It really shows us exactly like this is what our lives in office places are going to be like. This is what our that, this, how, that whatever it is, a third of our lives that we were going to be spent working, that is how it's going to be ordered. It's going to be ordered like high school. How terrible. And education has the ability to like disrupt these patterns, like almost by accident. When teachers and students sort of take literally the concepts of learning and enlightenment that their schools have assured them is the purpose of education, and not, order and obedience, sometimes people are like miraculously, accidentally actually educated. And then somehow, I think a lot of it, school administrators are very much on the lookout for that ever happening, so they can kind of clamp down at it and nip it in the bud as soon as possible.
Yeah, wow. I actually do want to add just a comment on all of this. There's a really good friend of mine who's a music theory and composition professor, and he had an incident where he completely changed his format of instruction, because he teaches at a state university down in South Carolina, and he had a student who he basically assumed was lazy and was not just not grasping any of the homework. He was teaching a music theory class, and there was one day he heard the student playing guitar and realized that the kid was a virtuoso guitar player, but he had no formal lessons or training up until that very, up until going to college. And all of a sudden he's in a classroom with people who have been taking lessons since they were 5 years old, 6 years old. And so not only, I mean, honestly, the comparison is, it's like you're a poet in one language, and then you're thrown into, a beginner levels course with people who, in another language where everybody speaks that language already. And so anyways, it's just, I'm only using this one, there are thousands of examples like this, but I'm just using this one example of my friend who basically made a huge personal choice on not giving a fuck about how little he was paid as an adjunct professor. And he started hanging out with the students, like literally after class, to make sure that they were all up to a certain level, and it's a real horrendous shame, how much work he was putting into with his students, and also how his students, first off, their grades started getting better, like across the whole classroom, but he still was at the poverty line, being an educator within the collegiate system. This guy has three freaking degrees, and he's still making, I think it was like seven, very low number, very, very low number. I think he was making under 20,000 a year, as a college professor. But anyways, I just wanted to add that, just hearing what everybody's saying, that we don't really have a system that allows the teachers to be comfortable to take the time to teach the students, just to grow. I'm seeing somebody popped up on Stack. Robert.
Yeah, and commenting on that, I've often wondered, Dorian, for every person who quote unquote made it, for, and however you would define that term, how many other people didn't quote unquote make it? I mean, it's amazing that, God knows how many people took that same class, or rather in that same school, and you didn't have a professor who took the time to see, people struggling, and why, and having having the time and the compassion to ask, why is a student struggling, why, so forth and so on. I was in that situation. I tried to be a musician when I entered Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana, and I didn't pass the reading course, which was music theory. And yeah, that's a whole nother whole nother story. But I really think especially the older I've gotten, how many people who have struggled through this system and the system just turned them out, and it's just amazing the waste, fraud, and abuse that this system does to not only its children in schools, but to people in general. We to put it plain and simple, we cannot afford as a nation and as a world to do this any longer. We just simply can't. So that's it.
Cool. So, we're coming up to the last 15 minutes. I've got one more question to ask everybody. But before that, I did want to just bring everybody who is watching to the attention within our comment section from Dana Steer that he writes, unions are involved with attempting to help nail technicians organizing. It's very difficult, but I agree that it is important. So he put a link. I'm actually going to pin the comment up at the top, but just for anybody who is interested in learning more about nail technician organizing, I'm going to put it up there. And so back to the final question. We've got about 10 more minutes before we get our final statement in here. So we have... what would you identify as some of the biggest obstacles to organizing the growing number of workers in the gig industries right now? And do you have any ideas on how to fight those obstacles? And then to clarify, the person asking is thinking of gig workers in the arts, but also freelance writers, independent contract drivers, and many, many more.
I just want to say that I asked that question. I picked up that question a little earlier and did address it. Is there any other questions?
Oh, sorry about that. Oops.
No, it's okay. That was one of the first ones that came through.
Well, that is the final question. I don't know. Did anybody else ask anything else?
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
In terms of diversity within unions, we know that people from all backgrounds are impacted by the worker, by industry, and we need to stand together, all of us. But in terms of leadership, in terms of making sure voices that are not people who are not typically at the forefront of movements are actually being heard and kind of encouraged to take up positions of leadership, do you see that within unions that it's really hard to have people of color stepping up to the forefront or feeling like they're supported within unions? That's just a question. Ben?
Yes. Well, from my experience, people of color have always stepped up. It just, at least in the campaigns we've seen here in New York City, the IWW has been doing a lot of organizing in the food distribution and processing industry, where there's a lot of immigrant workers, and they're doing amazing work. Amazing work. We have another campaign with Ellen Stardust Diner in Midtown, and people of color have been amazing leaders there. So I can't really speak to other unions, but within the IWW, they have stepped forward and definitely been encouraged and been amazing at what they've done.
Thank you. Does anyone, do we want to start with closing comments? So, yeah, I mean, I'd love to go around and just have everyone kind of give us a parting commentary. So I'll just go back to the original order, starting with Lucy. So anything you want to say in closing? Lucy, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Bonita, I can hardly hear you, but I think you called on me. I did have something, in Washington, D.C., We have the local government and the federal government, and a lot of black people were hired in local government and federal government. But what I've seen over the last 30, 40 years is privatization of services, where the government agencies that used to take care of certain things have been closed, and then the service is contracted out to private agencies. And in this process, a lot of black people who were union members lost their jobs, and then the services were given to contractors that were mostly white. And so we've seen a lot of black people losing jobs, and at the same time, maybe uh, less paid and less supported, less unionized workers in these contract situations step up. And it's very insecure, because the government services, the government provided those services year after year, and now the same services are contracted out on annual contracts, and the contracts, sometimes get renewed, sometimes don't. The amounts of money shift up and down, and so the services also shift up and down, and it's a kind of insecure situation.
Thank you, Lucy. Robert, um, do you have any closing comments you'd like to
Just brief. Thank you very much for having me here. It is a pleasure, and I am, as someone living in Indiana, I am insanely jealous to know that there is such a thing called a solidarity chorus and all this great labor-based art that Indiana is just the Sahara Desert of things like this. So I envy you all that you have a chance to enjoy this, and maybe perhaps my union, as errant as it can be, Lord have mercy, I can tell you stories that maybe we can get something like this started here in little old Indiana. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you so much. And Linda?
Actually, I think things are going on in Indiana, because I met some Indiana people with the Poor People's Campaign who were very vocal singers and harmonizers. So I'll send you their contact information.
I will be looking forward to getting hold of them. Thank you very much, Lucy. Appreciate it.
Awesome. And Linda, did you have any closing comments?
I wanted to make one, and goes back to the education thing a little bit. I want to ask the question that once you organize, something Laura said earlier, you have a global set of corporations, and if you organize, if you organize in Indiana, does the firm just move to Georgia? Just imagine if you organize across the entire US, well, the firm just moves to Jamaica. I couldn't even believe in Jamaica with this COVID situation, the first major outbreak that we had was because somebody went to work at call centers. Call centers were allowed to continue operating as after things were, many small bars and were closed down. The tourist sector was closed down, but they allowed call centers to stay open, and they were supposed to have all these systems in place, and people were calling the radio and saying these things are not being, they're not doing all the things they're supposed to be doing. And then of course you had an outbreak. And so the question is, when about the possibility of what's the solution there? So we have to think more about the solution in the global environment, but also once you have the union, so thinking of Dorian's friend, was he in a union? And if so, if you're in a union, why are we still at the poverty level? Why do we still not have health insurance? And I'm saying this because a bunch of PSC CUNY adjuncts are about to lose their health insurance. Now, if people know this, you need 2 classes on a consistent basis. And so what's happening with the budget cuts that have been announced by the state of New York is that there's going to be, they've basically cut back adjunct hours, which means a bunch of people are expected to lose their health insurance come September. And once you get off that, there are a bunch of conditions to get back on. And it's not, I don't see them getting back on, because once there's some systematic things that basically don't put you back on. Okay, but we're unionized. So once you get unionized, that's not the solution there. That's not the end of the story. So love to hear about that from at some future point, about once you're unionized, how do you get that power to kind of manifest?
Thank you, Linda. Ben.
Yes. Well, I think everyone here knows how extremely crucial organizing is, and I hope we can really encourage everyone we know to get involved with organizing. Unfortunately, a lot of union organizing is not glamorous. It's a lot of work, a lot of drudgery, a lot of meetings. But when you finally get to that point where you can punk a boss, you get rewarded so well. It just comes back 1,000-fold. I mean, I think the reason a lot of unions are suffering now is because they have no strike clauses, which basically puts them in a cage. And many unions end up acting like almost a union busting firm. But in the IWW, we strongly, strongly encourage workers to not have an election, don't bargain a contract, instead do creative actions and an escalating strategy that will, eventually humble the boss and smack him down and get your demands met, because we've got to go back to being creative, militant, and democratic. So good luck, everyone.
Thank you, Ben. Annie.
Right. So I, as a novelist, a fiction writer, I am constantly fascinated by the interpersonal dynamics in workplaces and their capitalism. And one thing I've noticed, I think, across a lot of what we've been talking about here today, across education in particular, is the way that workers have been trained to ally themselves with their employer as opposed to their fellow worker. And I think the more hierarchical a workplace is, the more I think workers tend to get like Stockholm syndrome. And the more abusive the boss is, the more they need flunkies to protect them, to keep the hierarchy in place. And that's just and I think breaking out of that mindset is incredibly difficult if you live under capitalism, which is why it's so, I think, important for I think a lot of socialist groups to do external political education. And that's just why I think the Bernie Sanders campaign, for all of its flaws and its ultimate failure, was so important for getting into people's heads a lot of very, very basic radical ideas that simply otherwise would not be implanted there, that they can then take with them back into the back into their office with the abusive boss and the to kind of break through that Stockholm syndrome.
Thank you, Annie. Adam.
Hey, great to talk to everyone. I just want to say quickly, I want our economic systems to reflect our values. I want leadership, decision makers, and the power to rest among those that are doing the work. And capitalism is not going to be the system to get us there. I think we have to work together to make sure we're putting the voices that need to be heard, that have been historically marginalized or silenced, up at the front. I would hold up the Federation of Southern Cooperatives as an example of this, which is a 50-year-old cooperative supporting Black farmers, protecting the land for Black farmers. You can find them online, Federation of Southern Cooperatives. That's just one of the hundreds of great examples of how people are working together, using a cooperative economic system instead of capitalism to get where we need to go. Thanks so much for the opportunity to talk with you.
Thank you. And Laura.
I want to make two comments. One is to Linda to talk about the adjuncts and the whole adjunct situation. I was part of a group of people that helped organize CUNY's adjuncts. And I met with them long before they became a union, when you still had Polachek in there. And I think that that one of the things we have to remember about unions is that they're not insurance companies. You don't pay your dues and then you go home and you expect people to take care of you. And Linda, I know you're not saying that, but I think that you have to remember that we are the union. We are the union. No matter who the leadership is, we are the union. And so you have to take the necessary steps to make sure that the union continues to advocate in a forceful manner for the issues that are important to workers. But it's cradle to the grave. It is not a business. It's a unique entity. It is ours. And we have to claim it and make it work for us and work together to do that. The other thing I want to say is that the best example of community and union is probably schools, the public schools. When I was in the public schools in New York City, we worked very closely with those union members that would work with us to make sure that we supported them and that they incorporated our needs for our children. And it worked. It was very powerful. We were actually able to get rid of a principal, which if you're in the New York City school system, man, you know how hard that is. We were what we call the guerrilla PTA. But so then after we won, finally got rid of the guy, then the regular PTA came in. But it is a thing where you can, it is the perfect example of the synergy between community and union and the powerful change that can make. So organizing. That's my story. And I'm sticking to it. Thank you very, very much. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much for being here. And Bobby, you're going to close us out.
Organize. But and we haven't talked enough about the difficulty of moving our leadership in so many of our unions who are just giant bureaucracies. And at this moment, this special moment, I think it was Lucy, or I forgot who mentioned, Lucy, maybe it was you, about this special moment that we are in. The opportunities are overwhelming. They're just facing us. So we've got to move our leadership. It's really, so building the rank and file is another area of busting through. And I also want to just hold this up. This is our latest CD. Can you see that? Oh, it's coming up.
Hats off to.
Okay, it's Hats Off to Labor. It's our latest CD, so you can get it. And also, we just have a book written about us, Song, Struggle, and Solidarity by Mark Abendraw. So you can check these out. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate everyone on this panel taking this time out of their day to be here and speak to everyone. I know we've had quite a few viewers and commenters, and I'm sure there will be people who will watch this after, in a replay. And I'm wondering, maybe we can talk after, but if there are more questions that come up in the after comments, maybe I can pass them on to you all. But just thank you so much for being here, for everything that you've said. I'm hearing that, we do need to organize. We do have the power. I'm going to speak in I terms. It really is up to me to get involved. If we don't start something, there won't be nothing. So each and every person has to, take initiative if we want change. And it sometimes means going outside of the comfort zone, going into the unknown. But this is the prime opportunity when everything is shifting to kind of lean into that. So thank you for all of your comments, and Dorian.
Yeah, and just to close out, thank you, Bonita, for emceeing tonight. So a couple of housekeeping things just before we close out of here. So the first one is we are preparing for a concert that the date is to be decided, but it's going to be in August, called Songs of the Resistance. And it was originally going to be, a live concert in May, and then this whole COVID-19 thing happened. So we shifted everything onto the online format, which has had some interesting shifts in just how we're presenting it. But this is again for 10th Intervention. Also, if you'd like to get more involved, there is the labor chorus that Bobby here represents, as well as myself and Annie are members of the Sing in Solidarity chorus, which you can check out at singsolidarity.org. But anyways, just to throw it out to all of you who are watching this, we are doing a recording session for Bonita and my piece this upcoming Saturday. It's intentionally meant to be on the spot, just like you're gonna learn the part and record, and it's meant for amateur musicians of all levels. You don't have to be a professional. But anyways, it's this Saturday at 5 p.m. if you'd like to come join us. So yeah, that's yeah, please. But we're gonna make a really cool video. Also, just because this is 10th Intervention, which is a new music organization, to all my new music colleagues and friends out there, we are we had a very successful new music organizing caucus meeting last Tuesday, as well as sort of a follow-up with the Music Workers Alliance, which is for independent musicians. And we are having our next meeting, it's our second meeting this upcoming Tuesday, is it July 27th? This Tuesday, look on your calendar. But if you're interested, send me a DM and I'll hook you up with it. It should be, it's the beginning of a long conversation to finally stop being taken advantage of from all of these venues that steal and steal and steal and steal from us, and yet still want us to pay their rent. So anyways, thank you all so much. Thank you all for being on this panel. Thank you all for watching. I promised Heinel I wasn't going to swear anymore, so screw the system. All right, thank you all very much. Peace and solidarity. Rock on.
Thank you. Good night.